The rain arrived before dusk and showed no intention of leaving. Sheets of water battered the iron gates of Ashcombe Manor while thunder rolled across the countryside like distant cannon fire. The vast estate stood against the storm with all the dignity of an ancient fortress, its stone walls darkened by rain and its windows glowing faintly through the gray evening. Most sensible people had already sought shelter. That was why the figure standing at the gate seemed almost unreal. A young woman clutched a weathered suitcase with both hands as rain soaked her thin cloak and plastered dark strands of hair against her cheeks. Her boots were worn nearly through. Her dress had been mended so many times that the original fabric was difficult to identify. She looked exhausted. She also looked determined. Miss Seraphina Vale had traveled 3 days to reach Ashcombe Manor. She had nowhere else to go. The gatekeeper frowned as she approached. "We are not a charity." Seraphina lowered her gaze respectfully. "I am seeking employment, sir." The man glanced at her patched sleeves and sighed. "The servants' entrance is around the side." He expected her to argue. Instead, she thanked him. The simple courtesy surprised him enough that he pointed her in the correct direction. By the time Seraphina reached the servants' wing, she was shivering from head to toe. The kitchen staff took one look at her and exchanged amused glances. One maid smirked openly. "You look as though the storm dragged you here." Another servant laughed. Or perhaps she lost a battle with a scarecrow. The room filled with quiet chuckles. Seraphina endured the humiliation in silence. Years of disappointment had taught her that dignity was often the only possession nobody could take away. Before anyone could dismiss her completely, a frightened cry echoed from outside. The sound belonged to a child. Several servants glanced toward the door but made no move. Seraphina reacted instantly. She hurried into the rain. Near the stable yard, a small girl sat in the mud, sobbing beside a frightened pony. 7-year-old Lily Ashcombe had fallen while attempting to feed the animal. The pony's sudden movement had frightened her. Seraphina knelt despite the mud soaking her skirt. "It's all right," she said gently. Lily shook her head. "It isn't." "It is." The child looked up through tears. Seraphina smiled. "Because you are brave enough to be frightened and kind enough to care for the pony anyway." Lily blinked. No one had ever described courage that way. Seraphina carefully brushed wet hair from the girl's face. "You have a good heart. Never be ashamed of that." Within minutes, Lily's crying eased. By the time they returned to the manor, the child was holding Seraphina's hand. Several servants stared. A few moments later, another observer entered the hall. Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe. At 38, Nathaniel carried himself with the controlled authority of a man accustomed to command. His dark coat fit perfectly. His expression revealed almost nothing. Since his wife's death 3 years earlier, very few people had seen him smile. He noticed Lily immediately. More importantly, he noticed the stranger beside her. "Who is this?" he asked. Lily answered before anyone else could. "She's wonderful." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. That alone was remarkable. The estate had employed 4 governesses in 2 years. Lily had disliked every one of them. Seraphina stepped forward. "My name is Seraphina Vale, Your Grace." Nathaniel studied her carefully. Rainwater dripped from her sleeves. Her suitcase looked older than some pieces of furniture in the manor. Yet there was something unusual about her composure. She seemed poor. She did not seem defeated. Against every instinct urging caution, Nathaniel offered temporary employment. Only until a permanent governess could be found. Seraphina accepted immediately. The weeks that followed transformed Ashcombe Manor. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly at first. Laughter returned to rooms that had known only silence. Ethan Ashcombe, clever and endlessly curious, began excelling in lessons again because Seraphina encouraged questions instead of punishing them. Lucas Ashcombe, burdened by responsibilities no 13-year-old should carry, gradually stopped acting like a second parent. For the first time in years he began acting like a boy. Lily became Seraphina's constant shadow. The servants noticed the difference. The children noticed it even more. Eventually Nathaniel noticed it too. The manor no longer felt haunted by grief. One evening he found Ethan laughing over a geography lesson. Another morning he discovered Lucas teaching Lily a game in the garden. Moments that once would have seemed ordinary now felt miraculous. Each miracle somehow led back to Seraphina. Nathaniel found himself watching her more often than he intended. She never demanded attention. Never sought praise. Never attempted to gain influence. She simply cared. And somehow that changed everything. One afternoon, Lucas stood beside Ethan overlooking the gardens where Seraphina helped Lily gather flowers. "Do you know what she is?" Lucas asked quietly. Ethan glanced toward her. What? Lucas watched Seraphina laugh at something Lily said. For a moment the entire garden seemed brighter. Then he answered. She's the heart of this house. Unfortunately, someone else had begun noticing the same thing. Lady Vivian Blackwood. Beautiful, ambitious, and accustomed to getting what she wanted, Vivian had spent months positioning herself as the obvious future Duchess of Ashcombe. She expected the children to admire her. They barely tolerated her. She expected Nathaniel's attention. Instead, she often found his gaze drifting elsewhere. Toward a governess. Toward Seraphina. Jealousy began growing inside her like poison. By winter's approach, it had become something far more dangerous. That night, after reading a bedtime story, Seraphina tucked Lily beneath warm blankets and kissed her forehead. The little girl smiled sleepily and reached for her hand before she could leave. Miss Seraphina? She whispered. Yes, sweetheart. Lily's eyes fluttered half-closed. I wish you were our mother. Seraphina froze. Her heart tightened painfully. Outside the bedroom door, hidden in the shadows of the corridor, Lady Vivian heard every word. And as a slow smile spread across her face, the first seeds of destruction took root. Winter settled over Ashcombe Manor with deceptive beauty. Frost silvered the gardens. Snow dusted the rooftops. Candlelight glowed warmly behind tall windows. To anyone passing the estate, it looked like a place filled with comfort. Only those living inside knew how much had changed because of one woman. Seraphina Vale had become woven into every corner of the household. The children sought her first when they were happy. They sought her first when they were sad. Even the servants who had mocked her arrival now greeted her with genuine respect. Ashcombe Manor no longer felt like a monument to loss. It felt alive. That transformation became impossible for Lady Vivian Blackwood to ignore. The more affection Seraphina earned, the more bitter Vivian became. She had spent years cultivating the image of a perfect future duchess. Yet the children still avoided her. Lucas answered her politely but never warmly. Ethan saw through her rehearsed kindness. Lily openly preferred Seraphina's company. Worst of all, Duke Nathaniel trusted Seraphina increasingly with matters concerning the children. Vivian watched it happen day after day. Each smile directed toward Seraphina felt like a personal insult. Each moment of trust felt like a stolen victory. Then she began searching for a weapon. The opportunity arrived through an elderly acquaintance in London. During a casual conversation, Vivian learned fragments of Seraphina's past. Her parents had died when she was young. She had been passed between relatives. Some considered her a burden. Others had refused to support her entirely. More than once she had been abandoned with nowhere to go. The story should have inspired sympathy. Instead, Vivian saw possibility. Over the following weeks, whispers spread through drawing rooms, tea gatherings, and town shops. The rumors changed slightly each time they traveled. By the end, Seraphina had supposedly invented her background, manipulated wealthy employers, and deliberately targeted vulnerable families. People who had never met her began discussing her character. People who barely knew her started questioning her motives. The poison spread quietly. Seraphina sensed something changing but could not identify its source. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Expressions shifted when she walked through town. The uncertainty troubled her. Still, she focused on the children. Christmas approached. Decorations appeared throughout the manor. For a brief time she hoped the strange tension would pass. Then disaster struck. One snowy morning, panic erupted inside Ashcombe Manor. A collection of priceless Ashcombe family jewels had disappeared. The jewels had belonged to Nathaniel's late wife. Their sentimental value exceeded their monetary worth. The entire household was immediately searched. Servants moved anxiously through corridors. Rooms were inspected. Questions were asked. Nathaniel personally supervised the investigation. His face grew darker with every passing hour. The atmosphere became suffocating. Seraphina watched the search with concern but no fear. She had nothing to hide. Then two servants entered her room. Moments later, a horrified gasp echoed through the corridor. Nathaniel arrived immediately. A velvet pouch sat atop Seraphina's bed. Inside glittered the missing jewels. The room fell silent. Seraphina stared at the pouch as though it belonged to someone else. "I have never seen that before," she whispered. Nobody answered. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. His expression revealed disappointment deeper than anger. That hurt far more. Seraphina stepped forward desperately. "Your Grace, please believe me." The words sounded fragile even to her own ears. Nathaniel looked away. The movement was small. The damage was devastating. Old wounds reopened instantly. Years earlier, people he trusted had betrayed him repeatedly. Friends, business associates, even members of his extended family. Now the evidence appeared undeniable. Logic surrendered to fear. Fear surrendered to judgment. Without granting Seraphina an opportunity to defend herself properly, Nathaniel made his decision. You will leave Ashcombe Manor immediately. The sentence struck like a physical blow. Seraphina went pale. Lucas stepped forward at once. Father, something isn't right. Nathaniel silenced him. Ethan looked confused. Lily looked frightened. Seraphina's heart broke for them. More than for herself. Because she knew they would not understand why she suddenly vanished. Within an hour, she stood outside the manor. Snow had become freezing rain. Dark clouds gathered overhead. A crowd had assembled. Far larger than necessary. Far too eager. Only one person seemed pleased by the spectacle. Lady Vivian. Seraphina immediately understood. The rumors, the accusations, the crowd. This humiliation had been planned. Her suitcase was thrown into the muddy ground. The same suitcase she had carried when she arrived. The same suitcase containing nearly everything she owned. Vivian approached slowly. Her smile was elegant. Her eyes were cruel. You fooled them for a while, she said softly. But everyone eventually reveals what they truly are. Seraphina met her gaze. I did nothing. Vivian laughed. Truth rarely matters. Before Seraphina could react, Vivian produced a small pot of black ink. Several people watched curiously. Others shifted uncomfortably. No one intervened. Vivian dipped her fingers into the ink. Then she pressed them against Seraphina's forehead. One letter at a time. Slowly. Deliberately. Cruelly. When she finished, a murmur spread through the crowd. Seraphina did not need a mirror. She already knew humiliation when she felt it. Rain ran down her face. Black ink mixed with water. The word remained visible. Unwanted. For one terrible moment, she was no longer standing outside Ashcombe Manor. She was a frightened child again. A girl listening to relatives argue over who would be forced to keep her. A burden. An inconvenience. Someone nobody wanted. The years separating past and present vanished. Pain flooded back with brutal clarity. Yet she refused to cry. Not for Vivian. Not for the crowd. Not for anyone. She lifted her suitcase. Straightened her shoulders. Prepared to walk away with what little dignity remained. Then a scream shattered the silence. Ladies and gentlemen. No, not a scream. A child's voice breaking from grief. Lily burst through the crowd. Ethan followed. Lucas was right behind them. All three looked horrified. Lily threw herself toward Seraphina. A servant caught her before she reached her. The little girl struggled desperately. Tears streamed down her face. Don't make her go. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Lucas stared at the black word across Seraphina's forehead. His face lost all color. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Nathaniel remained frozen on the manor steps. For the first time, uncertainty flickered behind his composure. But the damage had already been done. Seraphina looked at the children one final time. She wanted to comfort them. She wanted to promise everything would be all right. Instead, she offered a sad smile. Then she turned and walked into the rain. No carriage. No escort. No destination. Only a lonely road disappearing into the storm. The crowd gradually dispersed. The children stood motionless. Lily continued sobbing. Ethan stared at the road long after Seraphina disappeared from view. But Lucas never looked away from the word branded across her forehead. As darkness swallowed the distant silhouette of the woman who had become their home, something hardened inside him. And while the adults congratulated themselves for removing an unwanted governess, the Duke's eldest son silently made a promise that would change everything. Ashcombe Manor had never felt so quiet. The morning after Seraphina's departure, the winter sky hung low and colorless above the estate. A cold wind rattled bare branches against the windows while servants moved through the corridors with unusual caution. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Even those who had participated in Seraphina's humiliation seemed uncomfortable now that she was gone. The manor felt emptier than it should have. As though something essential had been removed. Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe noticed it immediately. At breakfast, 3 chairs remained empty. Lucas, Ethan, Lily. He frowned. The children were rarely late. Particularly Lucas, who had always been responsible beyond his years. Nathaniel waited several minutes before sending a servant upstairs. The servant returned pale. The children are not in their rooms, Your Grace. Nathaniel set down his coffee. What do you mean they are not in their rooms? The beds were slept in, sir. But they are gone. A sudden unease tightened his chest. More servants were dispatched. Every room was searched. The library, the schoolroom, the kitchens, the stables. Nothing. Within an hour, concern had become alarm. Then a maid entered the breakfast room carrying a folded sheet of paper discovered inside the nursery. Nathaniel recognized Lucas's handwriting immediately. His stomach dropped before he even opened it. The message contained only a single sentence. You sent away the only person who ever loved us. We won't come back without her. Silence swallowed the room. Nathaniel read the note twice, then a third time. The words struck harder with each reading. Around him, servants exchanged stunned glances. No one dared speak. For the first time since his wife's death, genuine fear entered Nathaniel's heart. Not fear for himself, fear for his children. Outside, church bells rang across the distant town. Search parties were organized within minutes. Riders spread across the countryside. Servants checked neighboring farms. Stable hands searched roads leading in every direction. By noon, nearly the entire county knew 3 Ashcombe children had vanished. Nathaniel joined the search personally. Snow crunched beneath boots. Freezing air burned his lungs. Every passing hour deepened his guilt. He told himself he was worried only because the children were missing. Yet another truth lingered beneath that excuse. The note would not leave his mind. You sent away the only person who ever loved us. The accusation felt unfair. Yet he could not completely reject it. By afternoon, clues began emerging. Ethan's winter coat was missing. Lucas had taken food from the kitchens. Lily's favorite blanket had disappeared. This was not a kidnapping. This was a plan. A carefully organized escape. Nathaniel realized something that chilled him more than the weather. The children had not run from danger. They had run toward someone. Toward Seraphina. The discovery transformed the search. Instead of looking everywhere, they began tracing where she might have gone. Witnesses reported seeing a young woman carrying an old suitcase along the eastern road. A shopkeeper remembered giving directions to a nearby chapel abandoned years earlier. Nathaniel immediately rode in that direction. The journey took him through snow-covered fields and silent woods. Dusk approached by the time he reached the chapel. The building stood forgotten among skeletal trees. Its roof sagged. Its stone walls bore the scars of time. Thin smoke drifted from a damaged chimney. Someone was inside. Nathaniel dismounted and pushed open the weathered door. What he found stopped him cold. Seraphina sat near a small fire. Lily slept curled against her side beneath a blanket. Ethan sat nearby reading from an old book. Lucas stood protectively beside them. For a brief moment they looked less like missing children and more like a family. Then Lucas saw him. Every trace of warmth vanished from the boy's face. You found us. Nathaniel stepped forward. You're coming home. No. The answer came instantly. Not from Seraphina. From Lucas. Nathaniel stared at his son. Lucas. We're not leaving her. The words carried a determination that felt far older than 13 years. Ethan rose slowly. She didn't leave us. Nathaniel felt each sentence like a blade. I know you're upset. Ethan shook his head. No. You're upset. We're heartbroken. Silence followed. Seraphina lowered her eyes. She looked exhausted. Yet even now, her first concern remained the children. They should return to the manor, she said softly. Lily woke immediately. Panic flooded her face. Tiny fingers wrapped around Seraphina's sleeve. No. Lily. No. Tears filled the little girl's eyes. She looked directly at Nathaniel. You sent her away. Nathaniel struggled for words. None came. Then something happened he would remember for the rest of his life. Lily stood and wrapped both arms around Seraphina. Her small voice echoed through the chapel. She's my mama. The world seemed to stop. Ethan lowered his head. Lucas looked away. Seraphina froze. Nathaniel could not breathe. Outside, townspeople who had followed the search gathered near the doorway. Several heard the declaration. Murmurs spread instantly. The scene before them contradicted every rumor they had believed. A fortune hunter would not inspire this kind of devotion. A criminal would not be loved this deeply. Doubt began spreading through the crowd. Nathaniel noticed it. More importantly, he began feeling it himself. As darkness settled outside, an elderly voice suddenly emerged from the doorway. Everyone turned. The speaker was Mr. Holloway, Ashcombe Manor's oldest servant. His face looked troubled. His hands trembled visibly. Your Grace, he said. Nathaniel frowned. What is it? The old man swallowed hard. I should have spoken sooner. Something in his tone changed the atmosphere immediately. The crowd fell silent. Even Lucas looked up. Holloway stared toward Seraphina with obvious shame. The day the jewels disappeared, I saw Lady Vivian leave the west corridor. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Go on. She was carrying something wrapped in velvet. A stunned hush followed. Holloway continued. I thought nothing of it at the time. Later, I saw her come from Miss Vale's room. Nathaniel felt the ground shift beneath him. The elderly servant looked devastated. I convinced myself it couldn't mean anything. Seraphina stared at him. Hope flickered across her face for the first time. Holloway reached into his coat. Then this morning I found something beneath a cabinet in that corridor. He revealed a small gold clasp. Nathaniel recognized it instantly. It belonged to the velvet pouch containing the stolen jewels. The same pouch supposedly discovered inside Seraphina's room. A terrible silence settled over the chapel. One truth became impossible to ignore. The evidence against Seraphina had not been discovered. It had been placed. Nathaniel slowly turned toward Seraphina. The firelight illuminated the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet dignity she had somehow preserved despite everything. For the first time since her banishment, he allowed himself to truly see her. And in that devastating moment, as the pieces of Vivian's deception began falling into place, a far more frightening realization emerged. If Seraphina had been innocent all along, then he had not merely cast out a governess. He had betrayed the one person his children loved most. The chapel remained silent long after Mr. Holloway revealed the gold clasp. The tiny piece of metal seemed insignificant. Yet it carried enough weight to shatter everything Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe believed. No one spoke for several moments. Only the crackling fire disturbed the stillness. Nathaniel looked toward Seraphina. She sat quietly beside Lily, her hands folded in her lap, her posture composed despite the pain she had endured. Not once had she demanded justice. Not once had she begged for sympathy. That realization made his guilt even heavier. Outside, the gathered townspeople slowly dispersed, carrying whispers of new rumors. This time the rumors were not about Seraphina. They were about Lady Vivian Blackwood. Nathaniel ordered an immediate investigation the following morning. Every servant was questioned. Every detail re-examined. The more he uncovered, the worse the truth became. Several staff members recalled seeing Vivian wandering parts of the manor where she had no reason to be. One maid remembered noticing mud on Vivian's gloves shortly before the jewels were supposedly discovered. Another recalled seeing her dismissing servants from the west corridor. Individually, the details seemed harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. A dangerous one. Within days, the carefully constructed deception began collapsing. Yet Nathaniel found himself troubled by something deeper. The evidence proved Seraphina innocent. But innocence alone could not explain the devotion his children felt toward her. Lucas had challenged him. Ethan had defended her. Lily had called her mother. Such loyalty did not appear overnight. Something existed beneath the surface. Something he had failed to understand. The answer arrived unexpectedly. While reviewing old household records, Nathaniel discovered a forgotten journal belonging to his late wife. The leather cover showed signs of age. Dust coated its edges. Inside were years of observations, memories, and private reflections. Nathaniel had not touched it since her death. Opening it felt almost sacred. Page after page revealed glimpses of the woman he had loved. Her kindness, her intelligence, her quiet understanding of people. Then one particular entry captured his attention. It had been written nearly 5 years earlier. The date coincided with a winter storm he remembered all too well. A storm during which young Lucas had nearly died. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. The memory returned immediately. Lucas had wandered onto a frozen river while visiting relatives. The ice had broken beneath him. By the time help arrived, the river had already carried him downstream. Miraculously, he had survived. Everyone believed an unknown traveler had rescued him before disappearing. The mystery had never been solved. Nathaniel began reading. His late wife's elegant handwriting filled the page. The words transformed his world. The unknown rescuer had not been a stranger. It had been Seraphina. Nathaniel stared at the page in disbelief. According to the journal, Seraphina had witnessed the accident while passing through the village. Without hesitation, she had plunged into freezing water after Lucas. She had managed to pull him toward shore. By the time villagers arrived, both were nearly unconscious. Seraphina suffered severe exposure and spent weeks recovering. Yet she requested complete anonymity. She wanted no reward, no recognition, no gratitude. She simply disappeared once she learned Lucas would survive. Nathaniel read the passage twice. Then again. Each reading deepened his shock. His son owed his life to the very woman he had publicly humiliated. The revelation alone felt unbearable. Then he turned the page. Something slipped free. A sealed envelope. His breath caught. The envelope bore his wife's handwriting. Across the front were 6 simple words. For Nathaniel. If circumstances require. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside rested a single letter. The first lines instantly stole the air from his lungs. My dearest Nathaniel. If you are reading this, then life has unfolded in ways neither of us wished. There are truths I fear I may never have the chance to tell you. Among them is one name you must never forget. Seraphina Vale. Nathaniel's vision blurred. He continued reading. The letter revealed that his wife had known Seraphina for years. Not intimately, but enough to understand her character. After the river accident, she had quietly maintained contact. She admired Seraphina's generosity, trusted her judgment, respected her integrity. The letter described countless acts of kindness performed without recognition. Moments when Seraphina helped strangers despite possessing almost nothing herself. Moments when she chose compassion over comfort. Then Nathaniel reached the final paragraph. The words shattered him completely. If anything ever happens to me, trust Seraphina with our children. She possesses the kind of heart that cannot be taught and cannot be bought. If my children ever need someone to guide them when I cannot, there is no one I would trust more. Nathaniel lowered the letter. For several moments he could not move. The room seemed smaller. The silence heavier. His wife had entrusted their children to Seraphina. And he had ignored every sign, every warning, every opportunity. A painful understanding settled over him. He had not merely failed Seraphina. He had failed his late wife. Meanwhile, events outside the manor moved swiftly. Evidence against Lady Vivian became impossible to deny. Witness testimony accumulated. Missing timelines unraveled. Her lies collapsed beneath their own weight. Society, which had eagerly embraced scandal, now embraced outrage. Invitations disappeared. Doors closed. Friends abandoned her. Within a week, her reputation lay in ruins. The woman who dreamed of becoming Duchess found herself unwelcome in drawing rooms she once dominated. Eventually, she departed England entirely. Her carriage left before dawn. Few bothered to watch. Fewer cared. Justice, though imperfect, had arrived. Yet victory brought Nathaniel no peace. Every morning he woke thinking about the word painted across Seraphina's forehead. Every night he remembered the expression on her face when he ordered her removal. The memories followed him relentlessly. At last, unable to endure the regret any longer, he made a decision. A storm swept across the countryside the evening he left. Cold rain hammered roads and fields. Thunder rolled through dark clouds. The weather resembled the night Seraphina first arrived at Ashcombe Manor. Nathaniel noticed the similarity immediately. The irony felt deserved. Hours later he reached the small cottage where Seraphina had settled after leaving the chapel. Light glowed softly through the window. For a moment he simply stood outside. Nervous, uncertain. A sensation he rarely experienced. Then he knocked. Seraphina opened the door. Surprise flickered across her face. Nothing more. She looked calm, distant, as though the weeks apart had built an invisible wall. Nathaniel removed his gloves. Rainwater dripped from his coat. I know the truth. Seraphina said nothing. Vivian planted the jewels. Still she remained silent. I was wrong. The admission felt inadequate. Pathetically small compared to the damage he had caused. Nathaniel handed her the letter. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Tears appeared in her eyes before she even opened it. After reading the contents, she carefully folded it again. For a moment, emotion softened her features. Then sadness returned. Nathaniel stepped forward. The children miss you. I miss them too. Come back. Her gaze lifted to meet his. The sorrow there hurt more than anger ever could. You know why I cannot. I can make things right. A faint, heartbreaking smile touched her lips. No, Your Grace. The title sounded colder than ever before. You cannot. Rain beat steadily against the roof. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Finally, Seraphina spoke the words he feared most. A place that can call me unwanted is not my home. The truth landed with devastating force. Because she was right. No explanation erased that humiliation. No apology erased that wound. Nathaniel stood motionless as the full weight of his failure settled upon him. He had exposed the villain. He had uncovered the truth. He had recovered his honor. Yet none of those victories brought him closer to the one person who mattered. As he stared at the woman standing beyond his reach, he understood something painful and absolute. Forgiveness was not a prize he could request. It was something he would have to earn. And for the first time in years, Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe realized he had no idea whether the heart he had broken would ever trust him again. Winter slowly loosened its grip on the countryside, but Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe discovered that seasons changed far more easily than hearts. After leaving Seraphina's cottage that stormy night, he abandoned every instinct that once made him powerful. For years he had solved problems with authority, wealth, and certainty. None of those things mattered now. The woman he loved no longer trusted him. For the first time in his life he could not command a solution, so he stopped trying. Instead of demanding forgiveness, he began earning it. He visited the cottage regularly, never unannounced, never imposing. Sometimes Seraphina invited him inside. Sometimes she did not. When she refused, he accepted the decision without complaint. Weeks passed. The children continued visiting her every day. Lucas often spent afternoons helping repair the neglected gardens surrounding the cottage. Ethan brought books and newspapers. Lily brought flowers. The little girl rarely arrived without wrapping herself around Seraphina's waist. Each visit strengthened a bond that no scandal could break. Nathaniel watched quietly. He noticed how Seraphina listened when Ethan spoke about his ideas. How she encouraged Lucas to dream beyond responsibility. How she never rushed Lily's endless questions. He also noticed something else. Whenever she thought nobody was watching, Seraphina looked at the children with the same love a mother might. The realization filled him with equal parts joy and regret. Meanwhile, the truth spread across the county. People who once whispered insults now lowered their eyes in shame. Shopkeepers apologized. Neighbors sent letters. Several townspeople personally visited the cottage to express remorse. Seraphina accepted their apologies graciously, but she never forgot the humiliation she endured. Neither did Nathaniel. Every memory of that terrible day remained vivid. The rain, the crowd, the black ink, the word, unwanted. The wound lingered long after the ink vanished. Then came the announcement of Ashcombe Manor's annual winter ball. The event was the most prestigious gathering of the season. Nobles traveled from across England to attend. Traditionally, the celebration marked the beginning of a new social year. This year, however, Nathaniel had very different plans. On the evening of the ball, Ashcombe Manor glittered beneath thousands of lights. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom. Musicians performed elegant waltzes. Silk gowns shimmered. Jewels sparkled. Conversation flowed through every corner of the estate. Yet despite the luxury surrounding him, Nathaniel's attention remained fixed on the entrance. Because one guest mattered more than all the others combined. When Seraphina finally arrived, the room seemed to pause. She wore a simple but beautiful gown of deep sapphire blue. No extravagant diamonds adorned her neck. No excessive decorations competed for attention. She needed none. Her quiet dignity outshone every jewel in the ballroom. Conversations softened as people noticed her. The same society that once judged her now watched with admiration. Nathaniel crossed the room immediately. He offered his arm. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Then she accepted. The gesture alone felt like a gift. Hours later, the orchestra prepared for the traditional opening dance. Guests gathered expectantly. Instead, Nathaniel raised a hand. The music stopped. Confused murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Hundreds of faces turned toward him. The Duke stepped onto the grand staircase overlooking the crowd. His expression carried unusual gravity. Even Seraphina looked puzzled. Nathaniel drew a steady breath. "Tonight," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "I wish to honor someone far more important than any guest present." The ballroom fell silent. He descended the staircase slowly. Not toward royalty. Not toward nobility. Toward Seraphina. Gasps spread through the crowd. Nathaniel stopped before her. Then, before the entire assembly, he knelt. Shock swept through the room. Several guests stared openly. Others covered their mouths. No one had ever seen the proud Duke of Ashcombe kneel before anyone. Nathaniel looked up at Seraphina. His eyes never left hers. A servant stepped forward carrying an object wrapped in velvet. Nathaniel accepted it carefully. When the covering was removed, Seraphina's breath caught. It was her suitcase. The same worn wooden suitcase she carried through the manor gates months earlier. The same suitcase thrown into the mud during her humiliation. But it had been transformed. The wood had been lovingly restored. Delicate silver roses decorated its corners. Every scratch had been repaired without erasing its history. Nathaniel opened the case. Inside rested hundreds of folded papers. Seraphina stared in confusion. Then Lucas stepped forward. His voice trembled slightly. "We wrote them." Ethan joined him. "So you'd know." Lily smiled through tears. "So you'd never forget." Seraphina carefully unfolded the first note. It came from Ethan. "Thank you for teaching me that being clever means nothing if you aren't kind." She opened another. Lucas's handwriting filled the page. "Thank you for making this house feel like a home again." Another. Lily's uneven letters covered the paper. "Thank you for loving me when I was sad." More notes followed. Hundreds of them. Memories, lessons, moments, expressions of gratitude. Each one captured a small piece of the life she had changed. Tears blurred Seraphina's vision. The ballroom watched in complete silence. Many guests quietly wiped their eyes. Nathaniel waited until she finished reading. Then he spoke. "The greatest mistake of my life was believing you were unwanted." The words echoed through the hall. Every person present remembered the scandal. Every person understood its meaning. Nathaniel continued. "Because the truth is that this house, these children, and my heart have wanted only you." Seraphina pressed a trembling hand against her lips. The emotion in his voice left no room for doubt. This was not duty, not gratitude, not obligation. It was love, pure and undeniable. Then Lucas nodded toward Ethan. Together they lifted a covered frame. Lily helped remove the cloth. A newly designed family crest appeared beneath it. Guests leaned forward to see. The traditional Ashcombe motto had vanished. In its place stood 3 simple words. Chosen by love. A visible emotion crossed Seraphina's face. Not surprise. Not sadness. Belonging. The children moved closer. Lucas stood on one side. Ethan on the other. Lily directly in front of her. The little girl reached for her hand. Tears sparkled in her eyes. "Will you come home, Mama?" The question shattered whatever defenses remained. For months Seraphina had fought loneliness, humiliation, heartbreak, fear. Now 3 children offered her the one thing she had never truly possessed. A family that chose her. She knelt and pulled all 3 children into her arms. The ballroom disappeared. Nothing existed except the people she loved. Through tears she whispered the answer. Yes. Cheers erupted instantly. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Several guests openly cried. Nathaniel smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Then he rose. A small velvet box appeared in his hand. The room fell silent once more. He opened it. Inside rested a diamond engagement ring. Nathaniel looked at the children. Without speaking, he handed the box to them. Lucas accepted it, then passed it to Ethan. Ethan passed it to Lily. The little girl carefully placed the ring into Seraphina's palm. Nathaniel's voice softened. "Miss Seraphina Vale, will you do me the greatest honor of becoming my wife?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. Yet this time they were tears of happiness. She looked at the children, then at Nathaniel. Finally she nodded. Yes. The celebration that followed became legendary. But even that joyful night paled beside what came afterward. Spring arrived wrapped in blossoms and sunlight. Nathaniel and Seraphina married beneath flowering trees surrounded by those who truly loved them. 1 year later, Ashcombe Manor stood transformed. Laughter filled every corridor. Warmth filled every room. A baby daughter rested in Seraphina's arms as the family gathered beneath a garden arch covered in blooming roses. Lucas stood taller. Ethan smiled more easily. Lily never left her mother's side. Nathaniel looked at them all with quiet gratitude. Above the entrance of Ashcombe Manor hung a carved stone plaque installed by the children themselves. Visitors often stopped to read it. The words were simple, yet they carried the power of an entire journey. Welcome home, our mother. The same town that once watched Seraphina leave in disgrace now watched her return as Duchess of Ashcombe. Beloved, respected, cherished. As sunlight illuminated the plaque and laughter echoed across the gardens, Seraphina looked at the family surrounding her and finally understood a truth she had spent her entire life searching for. She had never been unwanted. She had simply been waiting for the people who would choose her.